Welcome to our small business support webinar via the South Westminster Bids. I have James with me who will be hosting our webinar today. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick intro for anyone who doesn't know about Enterprise Nation and kind of how we got involved with the bid for this opportunity. So to say, my name is Diane. Welcome to our session. We have 4 sessions this month with the Small Business Support Month. All of the South Westminster Bids virtual support is happening through the month of May for small businesses. So that's why we wanted to get involved here. Enterprise Nation is a small business support network, and we support up to, or probably more even, 500,000 small businesses each year to start, grow and turbocharge their business. We launched in 2015 as a community platform, so a place where we can support all of our small businesses with the content, the offers and discounts, training, events and advice that they needed. So very similar to a session that we're hosting today. James has hosted this for us before via the Enterprise Nation platform, so we're super happy to have him again today. And through sponsored campaigns, so we support small businesses with the larger business ecosystem of our corporate, central government and local government partners, and also data and insight. So we really love to hear from our small businesses to make sure that we know that we're supporting them in the way that they actually want to, see happen, make sure that we're supporting them with the things that they've raised their hand for. So who is an Enterprise Nation member? They are small business, very much in the sense of the word. Majority are starting from scratch, either as a side hustle or something they've started in their spare room, looking for a lifestyle change. Less than 10 employees, but doesn't mean that they're not big on ambition. And they're looking to get support from trusted advisors and get that motivational and aspirational support that they need. We also work with larger organisations to make sure that we can all come together as a business ecosystem for those business support packages. So it might be education, so webinars like we're doing today. It might be events and competitions. So for example, with Salesforce, we ran a competition and grant program. We're currently running a small business accelerator with Amazon, which is all e-learning on demand and intensive boot camps to help your business do more online. And then we also work with trade associations such as ICAEW, and then we kind of connect with other ecosystem players to make sure we're all working together for the best of our small business network. So I'm going to go ahead and hand over to James in a minute, but I just wanted to share kind of where we came into this from the small business perspective and with the South Westminster Bids. So as I'm sure you know, we are looking at opening up. The restrictions are lifting next week. We should be some way back to some sort of at least new normal. And a lot of our small businesses wanted that support in how can they actually go back into physical locations, but also still have that blended omni-channel experience. How can they actually work with customers in physical location as well as online to deliver the best service they possibly can? So we know that businesses wanted help with marketing, they wanted help with financial support, and they wanted to get some expert advice. So that's why we launched the Hello World campaign to sort of support our small businesses with the kind of advice, training they needed once those restrictions have lifted. We opened a pop-up shop in Oxford Street to bring some of those businesses who have been flourishing online to get to know their customer in person now. And then we're hosting webinars like this in collaboration with the South Westminster Bids. So I hope you enjoy this afternoon. What we'll do is I'll hand over to James. We'll have time for Q&A as well. So should have about 20 minutes Q&A. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat, or once James has gone through his full presentation, you can always raise your hand and ask your questions directly. So I'm going to go ahead and hand over to James now, and he'll be picking up from here. Thanks, James.
No problem at all. Thank you so much. Good to see you all in the room today. I think we've got 47 people on the call today, so that's amazing. Thank you so much. If you hear a little yappy type dog in the background, I can't apologize for that. She's just yappy. So apologies for that. Working from home and in your kind of shed has its benefits and downsides. So today, for those of you that are a member of Enterprise Nation and joined us last time. Apologies, you may have seen a little bit of this content before, but ultimately Q&A, we will have time for Q&A at the end of the session. We'll make sure we'll get to as many of those as possible. So please do raise or come up with any questions you have around e-commerce for us today. That would be fantastic. So I'm going to kick off with sharing my screen. Just bear with me a second. Here we go. Let me make sure I've got the right one. Fantastic. So this is about how to structure a strategy for e-commerce, and marketplaces intrinsically are part of an e-commerce mindset. So, you know, the Amazons, the eBays, the La Redoux in France, for example, they all fit within what I would classify as an e-commerce or a digital channel. So I'm the co-founder and director of an agency called The Armoury. We specialize in helping brands scale e-commerce, especially in the food and beverage, the retail and e-commerce space here in the UK. We're based in sunny Norfolk, which is sunny at the moment. We have a small team of 12 that kind of operate, but all of us are, you know, experts in this space, whether it be from paid media through to SEO, through to overall strategy. I come from a world of retail. I've spent the last 20 to 25 years actively selling everything from drills to dresses. So I love selling product. So today, you have to be fast on your feet and adaptive, or else a strategy is useless. Now, that comes from an incredibly famous person called Charles de Gaulle, a Frenchman who led their country into a lot of success. Now, I have a slight problem with this because ultimately, yes, you do have to be fast on your feet and you do have to be able to flex and adapt. But ultimately, the one thing which we have a ban of in the office is we ban the word pivot. Because ultimately having a strategy and having a direction is incredibly important. Knowing where you're going, knowing the end goal that you have, whether that's a 6-month goal, a 12-month goal, a 3-year goal, you know, setting out that direction and really being clear in terms of what triggers, levers, and behaviors that you can conduct will help get you there. Yes, you're absolutely going to have to change your direction or slightly shift it slightly, but your end goal should never change. The issue I have with pivot is pivot tends to suggest 180 directional change in your business, which ultimately can be almost starting again. So always look at putting a strategy in place. And we talk a lot about 70-20-10, which we'll come on to a little bit later. So the next slide is very much around, we're built on the basis that you need that clear direction. You need great storytelling. You need really cohesive, emotional kind of campaigns to captivate that market that really helps you flourish and thrive. So if we think of all the great brands that are doing really well at the moment, like, you know, the Gymsharks or the Lucy and Yaks, the Lululemons, they both have a story and a heritage, but they're also incredibly strong in terms of that consistency of tone of voice, that real belief in where they are, and also stipulating the values that they have as a business for their team and their customers. So it just allows them to scale and thrive as a business. So we approach things in a particular way. So we build things around 7 pillars. Now, these 7 pillars are hopefully simple enough for me to understand, because that's important, but it also means you can start to put your strategy and your tactics into any one of these 7 pillars. The one that sits in the center is analytics and insight. That's core. How do you know where you're going, or when you get there, if you haven't put something in place that sets out the number that you start with and also allows you to track that along the way? Customer acquisition, trading mentality, operational efficiency, conversion rate optimization, customer retention, and voice of the customers. And we're going to talk through each of these 7 pillars today to give you a little bit of an insight in terms of how we approach things and how you can take away some learnings to kind of work through that. So the first of that is voice of the customer. It's not just about the voice you want to project out. It's about what a customer tells you coming back in. So the most important thing we can do is listen, learn, and act. It comes from the core principles of psychology, comes from the core principles of active listening. So we need to make sure we're really finding the mechanisms and the areas in which our customers can talk to us that we can listen. And that will be through a wide variety of different avenues. And it can also be through some key areas that you may not necessarily have thought of. So ratings and reviews, they all happen. We all go onto Trustpilot or onto FIFO or TripAdvisor to slate off the last B&B that we stayed off and there was a horrible thing in the corner of the bathroom we won't talk about. But ratings and reviews is a fundamental part of our everyday lives now, and they have had criticism. Amazon reviews, for example, not just on Amazon, but in platforms, there are issues with people writing fake reviews and being paid to write those reviews, which the platforms are doing a huge job. Trustpilot alone, I believe, have removed something like 2.2 million reviews in 2020 that they believe were fake and false across their platform. It's really important that you focus on your own reviews, but actually, have you considered looking at the reviews for your competitors, looking at what they have been picked up on in terms of, oh, okay, that's not a great thing that they're focusing on. Okay, how could we do what they're being slated for better and use it as one of our unique selling points? Customer prospects surveys. SurveyMonkey, simple tool, really easy. Google Forms, another version of a data capture exercise. What we're looking to do is really gain an insight into who our customers are. What are their behaviors? What are their attitudes? Where do they live? They're your socio-demographic profiles almost. But we're also asking for explicit things such as, do you like this? Do you not like that? There's a whole set of other data that you get from Google Analytics and Shopify in particular. We love that platform as an e-commerce platform. You get a lot of what we call kind of explicit behaviors is the bit they tell you. Implied behaviors are the bit that they don't tell you, but is innately buried into their brain. So therefore, they're viewing particular products in a month. They're viewing certain parts of a page or categories in a month, for example. That will tell you more about some of their behaviors and also what they want to buy than if you actually physically ask them. That then drills down into building a persona. So personas are something we talk about in marketing that lots of businesses feel as though they need to act on, in terms of they need to talk to that persona in a particular way. They need to change their marketing to attract that persona. Don't. Think around what those personas are. They are your imprint of what that customer looks like. So her name is Sophie. She likes lunching. Her husband is an executive in the finance sector, or she's an executive in the finance sector, and her husband is the man that lunches. Your persona needs to reflect a primary customer, one that you believe is your customer, and the personas will then, the surveys will then help you understand, oh, actually, we've got a couple of other little ones around here. We've got a dominant female buyer of women's clothing, for example, but actually around Christmas, we've got a male persona that is the buyer for that woman. So where does he spend his time? What does he do? How does he shop? So it's really important to understand that. And those personas just help you not change your marketing, but when you're thinking about campaigns and thinking about how you're targeting users, go, okay, would that make sense to Sally? Would that make sense to Brian? I don't know why Brian, but would that make sense to Brian, for example, in terms of if we're talking to him about these things, which words and which products does he like? The one thing over the last 18 months, I think, working remotely during lockdown proves is not only can we run a business remotely, but we can conduct focus groups with our customers. I think many of you probably have seen the advert for Monopoly, for example, Hasbro. They've put out a TV advert saying they've never got closer to their customers in understanding across the world how they play games. Focus groups used to cost £25,000, £20,000, whatever the number is. It used to cost a huge amount of money to bring people together in one location to ask them a series of questions for an hour or two. You can now do that on Zoom. Your best customers or people from your survey who said they are less likely to buy from you in the future. Oh my God, why? Put them into a Zoom meeting. Send them a little package through the post that contains product and a free gift or a bottle of something or other, champagne or otherwise, depending on your approach, and ask them the questions. Spend an hour on Zoom physically asking them why they don't shop anymore. What would they love to see from you? Is it product? Is it life stage they're in? Have they changed behavior? The one thing we always say is friends and family do not count. If you go into an investor's room and say, actually, my friends and family love this product, forget it. They really don't care. They're interested in the customers that you want to bring into your business, or the customers you have. How do you get more of those customers? Not necessarily your friends and family. They're all too polite and very nice, especially when I bake and make food that is completely inedible, let's be honest. So focus on your customer base. And it is, as I said, so much easier now to kind of do that externally. And we've talked about competitors in terms of the ratings and reviews, but actually, how do I understand what our competitors are doing? Do you have a spreadsheet that has, what are they doing on their free delivery offers? What's the threshold they do on their free delivery offers? Are they doing a welcome program on their email? If I visit their website, do I then start being stalked on Facebook with their ads? So start thinking around the kind of things that you would be wanting to change or implement on your site. What's the cost of international delivery? How long does it take? Which countries do they deliver to? Which do they not? Building a simple spreadsheet of here's you, here's your competitor set, what do they do, and what do you do, is a very, very quick way of understanding whether in fact your customers are even going to bother looking at your basket or your product pages or checking out, because you are so far removed from the market dynamic. Very simple, takes an afternoon or a glass of wine in an evening, and you have yourself sometimes some incredible insights around free delivery thresholds, how much they charge for delivery, etc. Really, really interesting behaviors. So that's kind of voice of the customer. The next one we're going to go on to is customer acquisition, which, to be honest, we could spend days on the customer acquisition conversation. I'm sure there will be a question around iOS 14, Facebook tracking, what's going on. There's a lot of change in this space right now. But ultimately, I always bring it back to the fundamental principles of marketing. We know our customer. We know the ones we want to bring on board, and we know that our best customers look like this. So actually, how do we determine what our acquisition metrics are for those customers? How many customers do we need to bring into the business that are going to spend X pounds to hit the sales targets we've set ourselves? Is that physically possible? How much per click is it going to cost us on Google to attract those customers that are spending or who are looking for children's bike helmets, for example? And Google has this amazing thing called Google Keyword Planner. You can use that and it will tell you the cost per click of every single keyword that you have going through. And there are some very simple mathematical calculations you can do to say, if 1.5% of people click our ad, and those convert on average between 1.5% to 3% on our e-commerce store, and they will spend £50 on a kid's helmet, then is it even commercially viable that we work in that particular media space? And they have that tool. Facebook is slightly more difficult, but ultimately the cost per clicks are usually around about the same or 1.3 times that of Google for a similar kind of targeting approach. Rough rule of thumb. LinkedIn, completely different, £3 to £5 per click. So it's really about looking at the reality of success. Which media are you going to use? The one thing I can safely say is do not put your eggs all in one basket. We'll come back to cost of sale in a second. So what I mean by all eggs in one basket is, well, I've tried Facebook, it didn't work. I'm going to do Google Ads next. That ultimately is putting your acquisition strategy at massive risk. Because if you are running around with all your eggs in one basket and it falls over, you are going to find it very difficult to get back up and running and be really worried about burning more cash in that channel. So I would always suggest that you are working across multiple channels at once, because if one iOS 14, 14.5 coming in, for example, visibility on Facebook and Instagram is more difficult to track its performance. Okay, where do we put our money now to minimize the risk in Facebook? But actually, we've got stuff that's working over here on AdWords or affiliates, or our email marketing is working incredibly well. How do we do a new competition or a discount in that sphere to kind of trigger our VIPs? Make sure you're really working hard on all your kind of channels. The last piece on here that we'll talk about before we get to cost of sale is there's no such thing as free traffic. There really isn't. If an agency tells you, well, your SEO, it's effectively free traffic, it really isn't. The time and effort it takes and buying links, building links, creating content, structuring your site, technically getting it to a place that it's visible by Google in the best possible way. It's not cheap to do, and it is certainly beneficial. And so therefore SEO and natural organic SEO traffic is not free. So everything involves investment, and it involves the ability to know which one is delivering you the best return on investment. SEO is one of the best long-term investments I think you can ever invest in. It takes 6 to 12 months to even start seeing a real reaction. If you see it a lot quicker, that's fantastic. That tells me that Google is very interested in that one page for that one keyword. And actually, how do we restructure some of the things to focus on that? Because actually it's really working in a short space of time. So let's come back to cost of sale. What does that mean? So most people talk about cost per acquisition, return on ad spend, ROI. Now, these are siloed driven acquisition metrics. So on a return on ad spend, or ROAS, you spend £1 and you get a number back. So for every £1 you spend, you get 3.56 times in Facebook in terms of a return on ad spend. That's £2.56 of basically revenue, because you've spent £1. That £2.56 at a 40 or a 50% gross margin is only £1.28 in terms of that particular money that you're making off that pound. So you're actually only delivering £1 to £1.28, direct click to buy. We talk about cost of sale. So that means that for your revenue as a total coming into the business versus your marketing outlay underneath, that is the ratio. You divide your cost into your revenue to give you a percentage of what you're willing to absorb as your marketing efforts. Now, we work that all the way back to a profit line at the bottom. So if you want to deliver 10% profit as your business, and this is your sales target, we are willing to spend this % on marketing. Now, what that means is we can then look at the return on ad spend and cost per acquisition across each of the media types to play around with it. So if email does particularly well one month, and email's a great media, it's one of the most cost-effective medias you can ever spend. So if you're ever worried about investing in a Klaviyo or a MailChimp or those in terms of, oh, it's going to cost me £150 or $150 per platform, I can guarantee that will be your best performing media. We've got clients delivering 50 to 1 ROAS. For every pound they're investing in the platform, they're delivering £50 return on their email, for example. So cost of sale is our way of making sure that if you want to deliver 10% margin at the bottom, and we know all our operational costs and our returns, VAT, etc., we are giving ourselves X% to spend on our marketing. And it means we can then move the marketing around to work more effectively, rather than going, Facebook isn't working, it's not delivering a ROAS, let's turn it off. It's not about that. It's then reinvesting some of that money, keeping Facebook running because it's doing a good job at the top of the funnel, and Google Ads or shopping is doing a good job of converting, for example, or email's doing a great job of converting. So cost of sale is just another way of looking at that conversion metric. So that's kind of how customer acquisition comes together. The next piece on the cable, on the circle, is trading mentality. So it's all about 70, 20, 10. And when I started out on this conversation today with you, it was all about that planning process. And what that means is we plan for 70% of things to happen. We react to the 20. And the 10 is, we just can't account for this. This is just random, even down to being I remember one of my owner founders of one of the brands I used to work with, he stepped into my meeting room and said, I'd like to try and sell chickens online. That's the kind of thing that sits in the 10%, the complete random, no idea where that came from kind of conversation. Or you can look at it in terms of test and learn. We're willing to put 10% of our time and effort into just learning stuff or testing stuff that we've no idea will work or not. It's a risk, but it's a managed risk because it's less than, it's only 10% of our budget and time going into starting with something. Start with the knowns. So I mean, trading mentality, you know what your seasonality is. So start with everything you know about your industry and the customer, that persona that you know that they do. So what are the events they'd visit? What are the sporting events they might travel to in terms of Cheltenham Racecourse or Burley or Badminton horse trials, for example? I'm thinking about a specific lifestyle, tweed wearing kind of Labrador, chocolate Labrador customer here particularly. May own a Land Rover, may not. But you start with the knowns. You start with what you know about your customer. The survey will really help. But you also start with what you know about your product. What sells well? What 80% of your revenues is driven by 20% of your product range? Because those are the things that you need to trade. Those are the things that you can grow volume and get your minimum order quantities up to a level where your gross margin on your product is starting to improve. So rather than focusing on the one product that you love and is really exciting, it's great, but it sells less than 2% of your revenues. So start with the knowns. Think around how your e-commerce dovetails into your wider channel mix. And what I mean by that is if you're a wholesale business, Do you want to disrupt your stockists by injecting a 20% off discount into their market? Possibly, I've done it. But it's also thinking around, what does that do for your physical store? If you're a store running e-commerce and retail, do you align your offers across the mix? Because you absolutely will have even though you're a nationwide business selling online, a large chunk of your customer base will be local because they love your brand, they visit your store. There's a touchy-feely thing about walking into a store and feeling product. I'm massively missing it and only just being able to get back into it, aren't we? So think around how your e-commerce is effectively your mobile storefront, and whether in fact your physical store and your stockists need to align with that fact. So there's nothing wrong in saying to your stockists, actually, we're going to do a 15% off weekend. Would you like to join us? And they'll go, okay, sounds good. We'll put out some emails, we'll do some social, let's share that and make sure that we're getting that kind of cohesive single conversation. And some of them will stand up and go, we'd love to be involved. And some of them absolutely will go, no. But think about how your e-commerce dovetails into that mix. The other thing to think around is, if you are having stockists in various locations, how you can help them drive the sell-through of their product in their store, because that means they'll come back and buy from you again. The faster they sell out of your product, the faster they give you cash to buy back in. And that means that sometimes you do have to commit some time and marketing effort to help them do that, because they are also trying to compete in this market and they need you to support them in putting your brand stamp into their space. So just think around how your store, do you have a store locator online, for example, for all your stockists in your e-commerce store? It's just another way for people to touch and feel that product from you, that they'll be on their mobile 20 minutes later in their car going, I loved that, but I'd prefer to buy it from the store itself. That happens too. I can't remember what the Americans called it. I'll think of it in a second. I'll just randomly blurt it out. So the other thing it's really easy to do is, if you're not thinking about that consistency, it can appear really complex to a customer. Don't try and do this offer on these two things for this week, and then you've got a global offer for acquisition, and then you've got another offer for VIPs, and then you've got a special offer on doormats this week because it's wet outside. Build yourself an Excel spreadsheet, build yourself a calendar that says, this is all my promotions that are running. Oh my God, that could be really confusing, because confusion breeds inaction. So customers will not buy if they're confused. They just go, oh, this is just too hard. Look, I just can't. Think about walking into a coffee shop and sometimes you've got 50 things in front of you, like a macchiato made with elven milk, God knows where from. I'm just going, how do I, I'm just going to have an espresso. It breeds inaction, and you don't always give the customer what they're actually after. The last thing is track, document, repeat. Two things. Excel spreadsheets, I quite like them, but they're also great just for logging stuff. Today's date, launch this promotion, it stops on this date. And then you can go back and say, actually, it worked, green, yellow, red, amber, green. Did it work? We think it might have worked, or it absolutely didn't work. Simple. You don't have to have all the numbers there initially. You can get that from Google Analytics. The second piece of tracking, document, etc., is in Google Analytics. Underneath every single chart is a tiny little gray arrow. Click it, and then on the right-hand side, you see a link that says add annotation. Put in the date, put in what happened, save. And now in Google Analytics, on every chart across their reporting, why last year did we have a massive spike in traffic? Open annotations. Oh, we did an influencer campaign with Holly Willoughby. And you've got, chance to be a fine thing, but ultimately you've now got a massive spike of traffic. Great, we know why. We're not spending days trying to go back through our emails and systems saying, was it email, was it paid search? It's there, it's really simple. And it helps you get like for like. Trading mentality, breeding a habit of success. Operational efficiency. This is the boring bit. This is the bit in the back office, the stuff that kind of makes stuff work, but it's the bit that makes money. Because ultimately we only talk about three things: make money, save money, drive efficiency. If you drive efficiency, you save money, and it means you have time to make money. So this may be, in some minds, the most boring thing in the world, but it's the bit that most owner founders and small businesses spend 80% of their time doing. So find ways to make it efficient. Spend a glass of wine in an evening drawing out on Post-its in front of you on a piece of paper the steps you take to pick and pack an order, or the approaches you take in bringing product into your business. What systems do you have to put data into? What pricing do you have to check, etc.? What do those entail? And then find things that save you an hour. Find things that save you 10 minutes a day, because it will be the right tool for the job and will save you days. You know, it is about finding the right platforms you have for scale. You know, some e-commerce platforms we love, Shopify being one of them, and some we don't like because they just physically cost more money to scale and they're clunky and they need updating and all this kind of stuff. So it's all about spending the time to pick the right tool for the job. And people like us and other agencies out there who have this experience are often more than happy to spend an hour talking through what's possible, because ultimately they believe they're going to get a job out of it, but they'll often impart knowledge and because they can actually help you along the way. So there's nothing wrong with asking a question. There's also nothing wrong with yellow box storage for very small businesses or businesses that have huge seasonal impacts. There is nothing wrong, and other brands are available. There's nothing wrong with using yellow box storage as your pick, pack, dispatch house. It's open 24 hours a day. You can have parcels delivered that are signed for by someone else when you're not there. And it also means that if you need over Christmas twice the amount of space, then you can pay them for Christmas for twice the amount of space. And then after January sales, you can go, don't need that anymore. I'm going to shrink back down again. Thank you. Yes, you've got to move the product, and yes, you've got to move all that kind of stuff. But it means that you're not paying for twice the amount of space for 11 months of the year. Also caters for your own business. You know, if you can end up in an estate where you ultimately have the ability to expand in future, great. But, you know, really do think around what things are around you that might not necessarily seem like logical option initially, but can really work for you. The other benefit of using something such as yellow box storage is it's insured. Your home is not insured for your product. If you have £10,000 worth of product sitting in a garage and you have a fire, I can categorically say, when I used to lead the team at Aviva, it will not be covered. So please do think around either getting additional insurance for your stock in your home or finding a location where you can securely store it that is insured. Take the time to document your processes. This comes back to the post-it notes, understanding the steps, making it relevant. The other piece is keep your customers and business separate. So if you have a personal email address that you're using as your primary email for your business, please don't. It is far too easy to not separate life and work. We all know that. I do have a personal email address and I have a work email address, and I use the two very differently. It also means that I've not got home admin coming into my inbox, into my business office, and I don't have business stuff that's going to supersede my home admin. Now, that sounds like a really not essential conversation today, but ultimately it also means that when you're in the moment focusing on your operational efficiency, you are focused on that. The last piece kind of relates to that a little bit, which is as an owner founder, as a small business owner, or even the leader of a team in a larger business, your time is the most valuable that either that corporation is paying for in your team, or as an owner founder, you are the most expensive person in your business because ultimately you wish to draw dividends out of your business to a degree greater than you would have running a salary in a corporation, because that's one of the whole reasons we start up businesses. We want to succeed. We want to have a bigger salary. We want to enjoy life, but also we want to enjoy what we do. So if you are picking, packing, dispatching, customer service, etc. in your business, then seriously think around whether in fact there is someone out there that could desperately want a part-time job 3 days a week servicing your customer service at a really affordable rate. And it means you then end up with 3 days, 2 hours a day that you are able to focus on some of the bigger things that will take you forward rather than constantly feeling as though it is a battle. Simple, but honestly, believe me, it is worth spending that little bit of extra expense. It's really difficult. I'm a control freak. I want to do everything myself. I physically can't. So I need to bring other people into my business in order to do that for me. Half the time they do it a darn sight better than I do. Conversion rate optimization, CRO, whatever it's called, it is, let's call it death by 1,000 cuts, because it is a science. In terms of there is maths behind it, there's statistical computations, there's correlation coefficients, there's Pascal's theorem and all this kind of wonderful statistical models that can be applied to improving your online conversion rate, but it's also not a science. Remember back to that competitor spreadsheet we were talking about. If you are charging $14.95 for next day delivery and every one of your competitors is at $5.95, that's scientific, that's factual. You've done the research, you're, you know, 9 pounds adrift of the competition, and it's probably a good reason why your conversion rate from basket to checkout is completely blown. So there is a science, but there is also just the science called common sense. There's also the piece around, it's not just about colors of buttons. It's not just about the links and the text that you have in the space. So on this example on the right-hand side, I'm very pleased to say I'm very privileged that we were asked to kind of redesign Casio.co.uk. And as part of that process, we were looking, this is a wireframe, designing, drawing out on, you know, if this was on a piece of paper with boxes and little crosses through it, it's just as good. We're looking at where these buttons sit, the color of those, whether one's primary, one's secondary, how much content do we have, where do they sit on the page, how far up the page, where's the break in the page, all those kind of good things. That's the science bit. But there's also the bit of, are our product images as good as our competitors? Do we tell everyone in 4 or 5 bullet points the real benefits of our product? Et cetera, et cetera. So really think of it not just in terms of the science, but also just the sheer common sense of looking at who you and your competitors set do it well, and then just aim to do exactly the same or better. We call it the minimum expectation levels. So there are tools out there you can use. Google Analytics is fantastic. And actually YouTube is a great place to get some insight in terms of how to get the best out of those Google Analytics tools. And it's something I'd love to talk to the guys about Enterprise Nation. How could we do an hour just getting under the skin of Google Analytics? Because it looks terrible, but actually there are some really, really simple things you can learn really quickly. Hotjar is a tool that you can record exactly what people see on your screen. You can see their mouse, you can see where they're hovering and all those kind of things. It shows you where people click. So if this button here, all graphic calculators, didn't do anything, they'd be clicking it and it wasn't going anywhere. That will immediately tell us we have an issue in that particular spot. That's a great tool. It's really simple to install on most sites. If you have an issue with installing it, then your developer, or again, YouTube will show you how to do it, or Hotjar, it's very simple to deploy. Customers' minimum expectation levels is the level which, okay, let me put it this way. Your customer type is a John Lewis customer. Your survey has said the place where they shop the most and they love shopping is John Lewis. Okay, we know they offer fantastic levels of service, and we know that's what they pride themselves on. And never knowingly undersold has been their tagline for years, both in price and in terms of their service. So if your target customer spends all their time shopping at John Lewis, maybe the place we need to look at for where they expect a level of service, delivery, communication is John Lewis. Now, I'm not saying we can meet that because we're not a behemoth. We're not the size of that store with hundreds of people driving that behavior. But we can absolutely look at where we possibly need to get to in order to do some of those things. And it could be just sheer delivery. So do they offer next day delivery? Well, of course they do. Do they offer click and collect? Well, of course they do. So how do you start to think around whether there are ways of doing that? Oh, we can't do click and collect. We don't have a store. Actually, there are a number of Morrison stores across the country. I don't know how many. But they have these things called InPost lockers and Amazon lockers in the back of every single store. And you can bolt that into your Shopify store with a couple of clicks. So therefore, you now have click and collect. Yes, you have to pay for that service, but ultimately it means for that customer, they're going to be more likely to convert than if they didn't have that service. So think about what their minimum level of expectation is. The last thing is around that product imagery and description we talked about, but more importantly, it's about listen, learn, and act again. Listen to what customers are doing. That may be through data, through Hotjar, etc. But it's about listening and seeing what they're doing. Learn what works. Browse other sites yourself. Shop more than you would do otherwise. Order from other companies. You can always return it. It's the horrible thing, but actually we'd hate it if someone was doing it to us. But it's one of the best ways to understand, do they do good customer service? What do they do if we ask them for a refund? We do that for every new client coming on board to us. We mystery shop because we need to know what they won't tell us. And then you act. Okay, simple, kind of. Customer retention. We don't make money on the first purchase. That's a little bit black and white, but actually for many businesses now in e-commerce, you can't expect to earn a profit off a customer's first purchase. If you sell one product, then that's going to be, it's going to be really hard. And it means you're going to have to turn to channels such as SEO and influencers and social as one of your primary mechanisms of delivery. And they are the harder ones to work through. Influencers and social, they're really difficult to drive behavior, and actually they don't always drive good repeat customer loyalty, for example. So I think customer retention is one thing where we're always looking for how do we get customers to add more to their basket on their first purchase, but more importantly, how do we trigger a behavior where they buy 1, 2, or 3 times from us? Because after the 3rd time, you've started a behavior. So if you look at all the offers from subscription companies that are out there, and I'm very lucky that one of my team actually is one of the ex-founders of Naked Wines, he knows inherently that actually the reason why we do 20% or 40%, actually HelloFresh was a really interesting one, 40% off your first box and then 30% off boxes 2, 3, and 4. It's not going to make them money. That's their entire profit eroded in every single box. But they know once they get to order 5, that customer's in a behavior and they should then earn profit for the next 6 to 9 months. So it's about investing time in the first experience they receive, whether that's through acquisition or whether in fact that's through giving them a story and an emotional connection that they bind to you as a brand. The next piece is around then, how do you continue that journey after they start with you? Welcome them aboard. Email programs, automation programs are probably one of the simplest and quickest ways. Everything from email, MailChimp, for example, which we kind of don't work so much with, but it's there. Omnisend, Klaviyo, they all have automation routines or flows within them. So if customer joins mailing list here and hasn't bought before, put them in this welcome program. 5 emails that go out over 5 weeks, that every single week you're telling them something new about your business. You're telling them about your bestsellers and your favorite categories. You're talking to them about new in. You're talking about the social channels where they can really engage with you as a business. And you're then telling them actually over the next 7 days, you're getting 10% off and free delivery if you buy in the next 7 days. That's your prospect program. For customers that buy for their first journey, won't get that. So how do you put them through a similar thing that does most of the same steps? You're just not giving them a discount. Or you're saying, free delivery. Thank you for being a fantastic brand new customer. Let's give you free express delivery on your next 3 orders. I wonder why I'm doing that. Because I need them to breed a behavior. So the other piece is personalize where you can. You have data. It's a value exchange. People give it to you on the premise of you giving them something back. By personalizing it, email subject lines, catalog, letters that go out with the brochure, for example. I signed up for one of our clients is a greenhouse manufacturer. I signed up for all the competitors' brochures, and 2 out of the 5 that I got back, I just got a brochure in I haven't got it here with me, but it was a handwritten grey plastic envelope with a sticker slapped on the front. No letter, no explanation, no where can I contact them, no special offers, nothing. A complete waste of probably around about £3.50 or £5 of cost. I could have put a letter saying, welcome, James. Thank you so much for requesting this greenhouse brochure. Here are some of our favorites our customers are loving at the moment. And actually, here are some places where you can see it, pictures on Instagram, etc., etc. A massive missed opportunity. So it doesn't take long to do, and it actually makes that customer feel super special. It's all about recency, frequency, and monetary value. So this comes back to a maths brain bit. So this is around how often our customers shop, when was the last time they shopped, and on average, how much do they spend each time they shop? Now, this is a bit of a maths bit. You do have to have someone to either do this for you or a plugin for Shopify or something that can build this model for you. But what it allows you to do is really understand what a VIP is. That isn't everyone on your email address book, I'm sorry to say, but a VIP is someone that's shopped in the last 6 months. They've spent more, they've shopped more than 2 or 3 times, for example, and on average, their average order value is £150. Those specifics are not towards any of your businesses. They're just some kind of James Davey made up numbers, but it's about putting people into pigeonholes. Unfortunately, we have to do it, but it means they're the customers that ultimately will be making you the most money. So therefore, how do we talk to customers further down the list that have shopped only once, a single order buyer? How do we get them into their second purchase? Your welcome program, great. How do we get them into their third purchase? Maybe a nursery program, getting them to buy more on their next order by offering them £10 off if they spend 100, for example. Because they've already shopped twice, we just need to give them that little bit extra to push them up the curve. The last thing is customers learn from customers. User-generated content, UGC, recommend a friend, whatever you want to call it. There are all sorts of things that kind of help this process. They love to learn, which is why ratings and reviews is such a big part of our life. We're coming full circle again. We're coming back to that first bullet point on the first slide about ratings and reviews. People buy from people. So therefore, if you're a brand, really show who you are, and that effectively the reason why you started this business is because you were a customer that of another brand didn't get the experience you wanted. You wanted to create something that people love, passionate, great price, great service, great value. But your customers are going to be the ones that tell your new customers that they too have had the best level of service. So one of our clients, Coral Eyewear, it's a sustainable eyewear brand. We've introduced customer recommendation module further down their slides from reviews.co.uk, great platform similar to Trustpilot and FIFO, for example. This is a widget code that you can drop into a site, and you can build these little beautiful little social testimonials that rotate, and you can rotate in the background. That's just telling customers they love those products. And it sounds silly, but it works really, really well. And getting customers to send pictures in, videos in of them loving your product. Many brands will worry about this. What if they show this in the wrong way? What if they do this in a different way than we intend it to be used for? Well, then don't use that, or surround it with images and other examples of things that are used in the way you think for, and other customers that love it. They will police themselves. The last bit is analytics and insights. So this is the bit that sits in the middle that tells us whether we've got there and whether we've been there and all those kind of good things. Don't drown in it, because ultimately I can spend days in Google Analytics. I can spend hours going through and trying to work out why something worked and why it didn't. But I would always come back to the fact there are probably about 6 or 7 key metrics that for you as a business really help you understand where you're going. And that's why we build dashboards for every single client that is effectively the building block of what they have. So this is a dashboard. It's a tool called DataBox. It's not rocket science. You can go and buy this tool. It's not expensive either. It's really, really good value. You can bolt in Shopify, Facebook, Google, MailChimp. There's about 150 different platforms and tools that you can connect into the system, and you can produce really good quality dashboards. This is one for this is a client, but it's not their data, it's fictitious data. But this is showing us the cost to sale ratio. This is tracking how well we're performing as a cost to sale against the revenue. It's telling us our sessions, our conversion rate, our orders, our percentage of new visitors. This is really important because it shows you whether in fact we're milking, we're getting a high volume of new people into our brand. But that needs to be set against actually how many of those are actually converting. Well, in this sample data, we're saying only 28% of our sales come from new customers. So therefore we need to probably work a little harder in giving those new visitors something that says why we exist and why shop from us. And you've got channels down here, the traffic from channels, so sessions, visits, whichever you choose to look at. And one day I'll go through and explain the two difference. But this is then showing where it's coming from. And as you can see, we've got sales quite nicely split across our different channels here. That's our eggs in different baskets. We've got good growth in organic search. We've got people coming straight to our site via the URL. We've got some paid search going on. Email is 13% of our revenues. Email should be between 15 and 30% of your revenues. So, this sample data set needs to work harder at email. But you can see social doesn't really feature on here. Social very rarely drives direct sales. But it does massively impact your brand resonance and your ability to be trusted. So find one platform to trust and be the primary source. So going back to that dashboard briefly, this is multiple sources, but all the key financials come from only one place, and that is Shopify in this case. This is giving us our net sales less returns, for example, sales less VAT. It's all coming from one platform. This data here, which tells us our traffic, is only coming from Google Analytics. And we're not really looking at sales performance from Google Analytics. We're pulling it all in one place. Ideally, you keep it all in one source. Unfortunately, due to the nature of our systems, you can't always do that. But you try and find one platform for your data to trust and be the primary source, which is why we build dashboards. And that dashboard is our primary source. Breed a behavior. Weekly, monthly trading. So if you don't sit down, you may be a business of 3 people. I don't need to put in half an hour every week to talk about how things are doing. We just do that across the day. You might do, but do you actively set aside half an hour to an hour to have the real conversations around how we're trading? How are we doing? Are we considering those conversations? So I would advocate putting in half an hour minimum on a Monday morning to go, how was last week's performance across the team? What were the successes? What should we start? What should we stop? And what should we continue with? And it will start to breed a behavior of communication across your team as you get bigger and as you scale. This is then there as part of your behavior. In a large business, when I used to lead, part of the e-commerce team at New Look, for example, we had at least 5 meetings on a Monday talking about conversion. We'd talk about bestsellers. We'd talk about bestsellers across women's, men's. It's a bit much. So, but it's really important for them to do because it's a much bigger business. You've got to really understand what's happening across every single department and channel. But for smaller businesses, just start with 1 meeting on a Monday for an hour. If you then, as you grow, you need another one towards the end of the week to understand what you need to tweak before the weekend to make the best value out of that weekend traffic. Perfect. But start with something on a Monday, breed a behavior. And then the last piece is coming back to the standard changes of document it, report on it, act on it. So you're coming back to that, even listen, look, act, actually, listen, learn, act. So your product launches, your detail, coming back to that Google annotations, just make sure you're tracking all those kind of things that go through you as a business. And that is our kind of e-commerce framework, which very happy to share. I'm very happy to kind of take you guys through. My name's James Davey. I'm the strategy director and one of the co-founders of The Armoury. If you want to scan that kind of QR code, you can. That takes you straight to my LinkedIn profile. Please connect. I'd love to talk to you more if you have challenges and thoughts. But today was really kind of helping, hopefully, give you some sense of it isn't a black book. It is not rocket science. It's generally down to some core principles. Yes, there's some techie stuff around you that you may need to get to grips with, but hopefully through Enterprise Nation, you'll be able to help and find people who can be trusted to guide you on that journey with some real authority and direction. So that's it from me today, but I'd love to open up for questions.
Amazing, thanks, James. We do actually have a question already. I think it was at the beginning there. Someone's asking, can I ask what the Google app is called again? Google Plan or something?
So it's called Google Keyword Planner.
Google Keyword Planner.
Yep, and it's there within, it's the keyword tool that Google uses to effectively show you how many searches per month are within its platform, but it also tells you the average cost per click for each of those. And it can even tell you what the likelihood of your campaign giving out a conversion is based upon its data.
Great stuff, great stuff. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or pop them in the chat. And we've got 7 minutes to go through them before we move on. But I had a quick question there on where to start with personas. It's one of the things that small businesses at Enterprise Nation sometimes, they know their product, but where do they start? How would you come across, how do you find who your actual persona is?
Okay, so let me give you one very specific example of how this is quite a fun exercise. I've been thrown out of a couple of retail stores for doing this, but it's actually quite fun. So if you think your customer is a John Lewis customer, for example, or even slightly more specific, let's call it a Monsoon accessorized customer. If you have a store on your high street, you sit outside that store and you watch people that walk into that store with a collection of shopping bags, look at the brands on those bags. They then walk out with a Monsoon accessorized shopping bag. You know that is a customer of that business and some of the other brands they shop with. So you now have an idea. You could surreptitiously, I wouldn't suggest this for legal reasons, but you're on a high street, it's legal. You could take some pictures of people around you that you might think are your customer and start to pin them up on a board and go, actually, what would this person do? Who does that, what does that look like? She walked out of that thing with that bag. Okay, that makes interesting sense. But I think it's very much around, think about their behaviors, think around the shops they'd go into, think about the supermarkets they'd go into, think about where they'd live in the country. Are they a suburbanite? Do they live in a flat in the center of the city? What age demographic are they? What clubs would they go to if they're younger? All those kind of good things. So it's about breaking it up into probably 3 or 4 different categories. And I'm very happy to kind of chuck those onto to you so that they can go around after the session because they're fairly formulaic and standard.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, just for everyone here, we will be following up with the recording of the video and James's contact details. So you will receive an email probably tomorrow once we've got that video uploaded to YouTube and you can connect with James directly. I think what we'll also do is if anyone wants the slides from James, feel free to use this email and email him directly, and then you can start a conversation there too.
We can do that, no problem at all.
Vicky's asking, what's the best email marketing app or tool?
Right, horses for courses. As with any platform, there are different tiers based upon your spend and what you're willing to spend. So let me take the assumption we're mostly small businesses here, because that's part of today's conversation. So I would say the best in the market right now that we actively use is a tool called Klaviyo. Now that is because it connects into most of the email marketing tools, and it gives you all of the e-commerce tools, and it's designed for e-commerce. MailChimp is a great platform to get started with, and ultimately is not a baby platform. It can still do a lot of things that other platforms do, but what you have to spend a lot of time is trying to work out, do I need that module? Do I buy into that one? Do I have to add that one on there? What happens if I get to 20,000 names? What does that cost look like? That sometimes is one of the barriers. So the ones which we love is Klaviyo, for example. The other one we've used for Shopify is one called Omnisend. That's very, very good as well. But if you're starting to think around something such as an Emarsys or an Ametria or a Responsys or a Bronto, for example, if you see those and see them, you're heading into enterprise.
Got it, that makes sense. Question from Veronica, what if any would be the approach to e-commerce if a business is selling services rather than products?
So the premise is virtually identical. If I'm being honest, there is very little difference. A service has an intrinsic value because it's the value the person wishes to pay for that service. And a product is exactly the same. How am I willing to pay for this dodgy flowery shirt that I'm currently wearing? Not a lot, but it's a case of the service is exactly the same. You've still got to write a really good product description, whether that's a dedicated page to that service to give it more weight and more insight and the brands you work with and all those kind of things. Absolutely. The conversion is that first intent to give you their data. That's a lead. So instead of a cost per acquisition or a cost of sale, we're talking about cost per lead. And then there's a couple of other steps behind that in terms of how likely are we to convert that customer into a physical customer, and what is the average annual retainer or service fee that customer is going to pay us, to then work out whether it makes sense. So a couple of nuances in steps, but all of the principles we've talked about today apply. Understanding your customer, looking at how you trade your services. Are you going to do a tickle on a service this month, or bolt those two services together to offer a new price? Because why wouldn't you? To drive up your service value, for example. So I don't think there's any difference. It's just about thinking about your services as packages and products, because actually in the back of my mind as a buyer, I'm doing exactly that.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. David's asking if you're taking an approach, a bootstrapping approach. So if you have no additional funds there to launching a brand, he's thinking fashion. What channels would you focus on?
So if you're bootstrapping, it's quite hard. It really is hard because you cannot buy those customers. So you are going to be very much working. And as I said, nothing's free. So I would certainly start working on the basis that's building your social profile as an individual, and you as a founder really starting to advocate the benefit of that. And one of the great things I could safely say at the moment is worth doing is starting to look at live streaming for your products. So live stream shopping. It's something that some brands are starting. In China, 500 million people a week shop via live streaming. And it's something us as an agency are massively focused on right now in terms of for our clients as a new mechanism, but it gets you right in front of those customers. And that means you can put links into Facebook groups, and you can put links into your social channels, drawing them into your space to showcase that product. And even if you have 10 people on that first live stream or 5 people on that first live stream, you will then start to build your customer base. SEO would be the second part, and CRM and email, all of those things we talked about in email in terms of that customer retention. Focus on that. Make sure your product dispatches go out with a beautiful card handwritten to say, oh, it's so good for you to be one of our first customers. We love you. Do come back. Tell us your thoughts. Post on social. Treat those as if they were walking into your physical store, and how you would treat that customer if they were right in front of you. Use that same premise for if you're doing digital.
Amazing. And very last question here, as we run into time. Mans is asking, so her business is cat accessories and furniture. How would you put a customer persona together for that? Because she says everyone likes cats. Well,
apart from predominant dog owners. So sorry to be blunt, but there is that bit around they may all like cats, but actually in their lifestyle, they will have very different behaviors. So are they like us? We've got 2 young cats in the house. I did not want my wife to go and spend a huge amount of money on a piece of cat furniture so we just went, because we had no idea, one, whether the kids were going to keep the cats, or two, which is a bit unfortunate thing, but yes, we needed to know whether they get on with our dog. And so we bought from Lidl, the middle of Lidl. We bought cat stuff from there. I'm sorry, who owns the cat brand? I really apologize for that. But if you're building a persona around that customer, what I'm saying is that you have multiple different types of buying behaviors within that product set. So, and that really then comes down to how you present your product to that customer in your imagery and your descriptions. So if you're targeting a value customer at a value end, and they shop at Lidl, Aldi, and other stores of a more value nature, then ultimately you can target them with specific messaging and specific imagery that works for that customer. If they are a jewel stroke, fat face, white stuff kind of lifestyle customer, then you're going to need to position it in a very different way. So even though they all love cats, they're two very different customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to have to call it time there, but we will get some follow-up for you, James, there, because I still see some questions coming in the chat. Thank you so much for your insights today. It's always really interesting to hear from you there. So yes, feel free, if you have your emails, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'll also make sure that James can follow up with you guys, and we'll send that email out probably tomorrow afternoon. Thanks so much to the South Westminster Bids for hosting us today. We have another 3 workshops coming up. So one on Thursday, which is around the power of networking, and then 2 next week, one that's around building your retail business online and offline. And then also we have a fireside chat the following Thursday, which is around company culture and how to be an equitable leader. Thanks again, James. That was really great. I think you've got a few new people who'll be connecting with you to talk personas, cat furniture, and more. Thanks everyone for joining us. And we'd love to see you at the next workshop as well. So have a lovely afternoon, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Hey guys.